I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm just conscious of getting through some material in the time. But let's talk about a little more about this, because the latest confirmed casualties of children is more than 7,000, women nearly 5,000. But let's just be frank. The world has seen the results of your bombing campaign, street after street after street. We've seen the destroyed apartment buildings. How were all of those, with their civilian inhabitants, legitimate military targets?
Did you see Berlin? The pictures from Berlin from 1945.
I'm asking you
Did
about.
you see what
I'm
happened
asking
in
you
Japan?
about Gaza.
No, because you're fine, and I'll answer about Gaza. And if you let me finish a few sentences, I'll actually be able to make a couple of points. If you want to interview yourself, you can go ahead and do that. But a couple of points in Gaza. What we have done is taken unprecedented measures to get the civilians out of harm's way. Right now, Israel is operating in Rafah, and 950,000 people have been moved from the war zone. Countries that are intentionally targeting civilians don't drop millions of leaflets and make phone calls to people to get them out of harm's way. We have taken action that no other country has. The rules of war are very clear. You have to distinguish between combatants and non-combatants. You have to actually use proportionate force, and you have to exercise precaution. That is exactly what Israel has done from the beginning of the war. You mentioned the issue of children. Every child who is killed in a war is a tragedy. But those numbers now have been revised almost in half. As of 3 weeks ago, the UN was saying that Israel killed 15,000 children were killed in this war in Gaza. Now that number is.
I think you'll find that I quoted the latest figures, but I want to come back to that.
No, that's right, but they've been revised. They've been revised because what happens is, Sarah, people are using the Hamas Health Ministry statistics. There was a case, you remember, at the beginning of the war, 10 days into the war,
I'm concerned about wasting. I'm sorry about using time on issues that have been covered in the beginning of the war.
If you don't want an answer. If you don't want an answer, I want to actually deal with the reports and the statistics that you're citing. So there was a case 10 days into the war where a hospital was hit by a rocket. Everybody thought Israel was responsible. There were headlines around the world which said at least 500 people, Palestinians, were killed. Innocents were killed at that hospital. Turns out it wasn't Israel. It was Islamic Jihad. And this remarkable thing happened. For the first time in 2,000 years, people were resurrected in Israel, because then there were only 50 to 60 casualties. But that 500 number was still in the UN numbers. So I would ask people in Australia, a fair-minded people with in a fair-minded country, wait until all the facts are there. When you see the facts, you will see that Israel has acted with great care to avoid Palestinian civilian casualties against an enemy that embeds itself in hospitals, schools, mosques, and does everything to put their civilians into harm's way. We're doing everything to keep them out of harm's way.
Let's go to the second rung of allegations, or the next rung of allegations from the ICC. And this is about using starvation as a weapon of war. Now, I just want to take one measure of the suffering from many that have been presented by international aid agencies, as well as by your allies. UNICEF says 50,000 children under 5 are suffering from acute malnutrition. Why has Israel allowed this?
First of all, we haven't allowed it, and it hasn't been our policy. And I think that is the most outrageous libel against Israel. I sit in the war cabinet, and from day one, our policy was to enable basic humanitarian assistance to reach those people in need. We've had over a half a million tons of humanitarian assistance, including 400,000 tons of food, 20,000 trucks of food we have enabled to move into Gaza. And so the whole idea that Israel has a policy of starvation is absurd. You might not know this number. 20,000 Americans 2 years ago died of malnutrition. There have been 32 people in Gaza who supposedly have died of malnutrition. Everybody who would die of malnutrition, that is a tragedy. Israel has no policy of trying to prevent humanitarian assistance and certainly food from coming into Gaza. So this whole case is libelous against Israel. I think it's terrible. And the ICC prosecutor should have come to Israel and learned the facts rather than making this charge against Israel.
Who should the judges listen to? UNICEF or Benjamin Netanyahu?
Benjamin Netanyahu, because he's a leader of a democratic society. I don't know anything about UNICEF. I don't know what that organization is about. You take an organization like UNRWA, it's a refugee agency. Half of them are people who work for UNRWA, are first-degree relatives of Hamas. 10% actually are part of Hamas's military arm. 24 of this UN agency, 24 of their personnel perpetrated the attacks of October 7th. I'm not trying to smear UNICEF. They may do tremendous work all over the world. But the fact is that in Gaza, most of those people are beholden to Hamas. And any free and independent voice there will probably get shot in the back of the head if they send a report that is not the report that Hamas wants. The people of Gaza suffer because of Hamas. The best thing we can do is get rid of Hamas and give the Palestinians a different future, and of course, make Israel more secure.
Now, no one is disputing the intense misery inflicted on the people of Gaza by Hamas. That is beyond question. However, you just used the number of trucks, for example, that Israel has allowed into Gaza. 25,000 is the number that your Prime Minister used. Before the war, the average of trucks should now be at 75,000. Why shouldn't Israel be held accountable for the suffering of people when humanitarian aid has been reduced by the amount that is evident in those figures?
So as they say, there's Mark Twain once said, a great American writer, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. You just said a statistic of the number of trucks before the war. What you didn't say is the number of trucks before the war was not humanitarian assistance. It was all commercial goods going into and out of Gaza. There's not the same level of commercial activity now as it was before October 7th. But actually, humanitarian assistance is greater today than it was on October 7th. There are more food trucks, your listeners should hear this, there are more food trucks going into Gaza today than there were before October 7th. Of course, the local market has been hit. The agricultural produce within Gaza has been hit. But there's more food and humanitarian assistance that is going into Gaza today than went in before the war. Israel is supplying water, actually in much greater quantities than we supplied at the beginning of the war. Around 7% of Gaza's water supply was provided by Israel on October 7th. Today, it's around 45%. So Israel's doing food, water, medicine, doing everything we can to flood humanitarian assistance in. You see it reflected, Sarah, in the precipitous drop of prices in Gaza are down 80 or 90%. Generally, markets don't lie. When there's more supply, the prices go down.
Yes,
that's what's happening in Gaza. These allegations
let me just
of famine are false.
I didn't use the word famine. What I'm putting to you is a range of opinions expressed by every single aid agency that is operating inside Gaza, including the Friends of Israel. It comes back to the question I posed to you before. Should the judges in the ICC who will decide on these warrants make their determination based on the opinion of every aid agency in the world operating in Gaza, or your comments and those of your Prime Minister?
They should make their opinion based on the facts. They should look at the facts. If they follow the facts, I have no doubt that they will throw these attempt to get arrest warrants out, because the charges are completely baseless. What is happening in Gaza, and you said it before, Hamas is responsible for huge suffering in Gaza, and not only putting the civilians in harm's way, but also the humanitarian assistance. They are stealing the food. They are extorting the people of Gaza. They are denying people who won't maybe fight for them or do this or that thing for them. And that's what they do for the aid agencies. You may remember at the beginning of the war, you may have covered it on your show, that in one UN agency in Israel, in Gaza, they tweeted out that Hamas has stolen all of our supplies. That tweet lasted for several hours because the person's life was threatened and they had to take that tweet down. Hamas is trying to present a picture to the world that is false. So I hope these judges, if they're as fair-minded as the people of Australia and the leaders of Australia, hopefully they will get beyond what reports are coming out to Gaza, see the facts for themselves. They can come to Israel. We can share with them everything that we have on the humanitarian assistance we're providing, what has happened day after day since the beginning of the war. I think if they follow the facts, Israel will be seen as being completely innocent of all these charges.
Thanks for watching. Drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and hit subscribe to stay updated with our latest content. Until next time, stay informed and inspired. This is Dejobnik signing off.